So I don't have the energy between all the nonsense going on, including the stuff that I'm going to be talking about in this video, to do the whole makeup presentation thing. I just don't have it in me right now. I suppose the upside of that is it's a reassurance that I am not an AI creation and I am an actual person, wrinkles, pockmarks, and all. But also, I guess, future-proofing this a little bit. If it ever looks a little too smooth, you'll know that YouTube, owned by Google, applied an AI sheen to it without me asking. So, AI, we're back on this again. So, I've talked about AI a fair few times at this point. I've mostly talked about it in artistic or artistic adjacent applications, or in the broadest sense in terms of how it is built, because I talked about how it's innately built on theft. But I've largely focused on generative AI in artistic fields like Lucasfilm showing off its really awful AI, which I talked about earlier this year. I've talked about the AI actress, Tilly Norwood, which funny how quiet that whole thing has gotten since, the big stories about her. Like, I thought you were just about to close a whole bunch of deals and get her like an agent or put her in a movie or something. What happened with that? Because trust me, if they had inked any of those deals, they would have announced it. They would have bragged, shouted from the rooftops. Funny how quiet that got. But what I haven't really done is put too much focus on specific applications of AI outside of those uses. It's not that I don't have opinions on AI outside of those uses. It's just that I don't want to get so deep in the weeds on AI as a topic that I start digging into every aspect of it. But something happened to me where it's going to give me the opportunity to talk about AI in search engines, Google specifically, but in general, the concept, why it's terrible, and how it claimed this channel was over. Oh, geez. So we are going to get into the specifics of what Google AI Summary said about Council of Geeks, because it's kind of wild. But before we get there, there is something I actually want to establish first. Because if I start to get into the specific instance of what it was that happened, I know what the defense from AI evangelists will be. Like, oh, it was a mistake. It'll get better. Those things will happen less. Here's what I want to make clear up front. And here's what I want you to pretty much always remember, at least in this video, if not take it going forward. Even if these things got as good as the evangelists say that they will, which is incredibly dubious given the time frame that they've said how much better this stuff's supposed to get. It should have all been fixed by now anyways. It hasn't been, and there are reasons for that, including some of the ways that these things are trained initially, and there are things they could do to improve that, but they won't, and I did a whole video talking about that. But anyway, to bring it back to this, what I want you to keep in mind is, in general, but also specifically in this instance, the idea of AI-generated summaries based off of searches of the internet are a terrible idea, even if it worked as intended and as the way the evangelists say it will one day be. I'm going to spend a whole bunch of time talking about the nonsense that it said, the way that it failed, but even if it worked, it would still be bad for some pretty basic reasons. When you have AI-generated summaries, and again, even if they're accurate, which they're frequently not, so you shouldn't be using them anyway, but even if they were, they are a culmination of scraping all the search engine results that it's generating for you and then summarizing those. That is an innately self-destructive mechanism because it lowers the traffic. This has actually become an issue already, especially for news-related sites. People do a search on something that happened, and then they read the AI Google summary, but then they don't go to the sites and read the whole story. Now, you could say, well, people should go to the sites. Yes, I agree, but let's be honest, most people won't. Most people don't read past the headlines, even when they do. But Those sites need the traffic. They cost money to run. If it's a news site, they have to pay their journalists. The very things that AI is scraping in order to get this summary put together for you, it is choking them off and depriving them of traffic, which means they can't sell ad space, or if they can't sell it for as much. They can't get deals. Clicks are down, views are down. If people aren't going to the sources, those sources aren't generating revenue, which means those sources will get choked off, will get worse, or may even eventually go out of business. And then where the hell is Google AI supposed to be pulling the information to get its summaries for? Because it's not doing original research, and it never will. That's not even a pitch that the evangelists say will happen. It is compiling the existing research, but it is starving the sites that give you that research of traffic, making them less viable to continue existing. Even if this thing worked, it would destroy the very sources that it needs to even function. It's a terrible idea. So now that we've established all that, and keep it in mind, it's a horrible idea in and of itself, let's talk about the specific nonsense that it did in relation to me. So, I'm not gonna lie. I Google not my own name actually, but I Google Council of Geeks intermittently, now and then, especially if I'm bored and my brain is antsy. I am not gonna pretend I am above that. Usually it's just to see if something has cropped up, in an area where I'm like, oh, great, now they're going to start shouting at me. It's also something that I'll do if I've suddenly gotten a massive influx of activity on an older video. I'll be like, oh, great, where did this get shared around? Who complained about this and on what platform? So, fully admit, I search Council of Geeks every now and then. So, a couple weekends ago, I was bored, and I searched it, and I don't know what actually compelled me to move on over to the AI summary, but what I saw made me laugh because of how moronic it was. But also, the more I thought of it, the more I'm like, that's actually really screwed up. So let's take a look. I did take the liberty of screenshotting this because otherwise there'd be no record. That's another thing that I'll circle back on. But according to Google AI Overview, the Council of Geeks podcast, which included, notice the past tense, the YouTube channel run by Nathaniel Wayne, parentheses, Vera Wild. Oh, I'll pause right there. When I first initially bitched about this on Blue Sky, a few people were like, did this thing just dead name you? Technically, no. I don't consider Nathaniel to be a dead name. I don't treat it as such. I don't use it. I don't really use it professionally at all anymore. And I'm not really used to hearing myself called that anymore. But I don't actually consider it a dead name in the way that most trans people say that. That having been said, if I did consider it a dead name, it probably would have shown up there regardless. I don't think it was taking the fact that I personally don't treat it as a dead name into account when it put it there. I'm going to go out on a limb and say. But anyways, the channel run by Nathaniel Wayne, aka Vera Wild, has ended. The podcast concluded, and while the YouTube channel was previously dedicated to content like Doctor Who analysis, it is no longer active. I'm not going to read all the bullet points, but if we go to the middle one, which is labeled reasons, while the specific reasons for the shutdown are not detailed in the provided snippets, the consensus is that the project is over. Now, if you look up in the corner there, you can see where it's pulling this from. Mostly Reddit and a couple of fandom entries. Now, the thing is, none of those things claim this. So this isn't a matter of, oh, well, it pulled from a source it thought was reliable. No, literally none of those places, at least that I could find, actually claim that my channel and or podcast are over. So it just made it up. Is it slightly weird or vain of me to actually be most offended at the fact that it used this image to represent the channel? I don't even know how many years ago I stopped using that one. That's like one of the original images from the very early days of the channel. That might even be the first logo I ever put together for this thing. And you can tell because it features two people who were featured in the scripted shorts that this channel used to be about. So, boy, couldn't do anything more up to date than that. Wow. But obviously, this claim had me intrigued. So while I would normally not engage with AI in conversation, I did ask for more information about the ending of things. Because it said the reasons were unclear, but the consensus was it was over. I figured if I dug just even one more search deeper than that, it would make up something. And boy, did it!
The YouTube channel Council of Geeks, created by Vera Wild, formerly Nathaniel Wayne.
See, that's slightly better. It's acknowledging which name is actually not currently in use anymore. Again, still don't consider it a dead name, but why couldn't you have worded it that way the first time?
Is at the center of controversy over its host's alleged harassment and toxic behavior.
Oh, let's get into the details on this. This is gonna be juicy.
Targeting of creator Jesse Gender. No, not doing that one. I gotta do something here. Targeting of creator Jesse Gender. In 2024, a serious public feud developed between Wild and another content creator, Jesse Gender, over Wild's podcast, Frack This Podcast. Gender claimed that Wild displayed toxic behavior behind the scenes and weaponized her fan base to target her.
Oh, hey, look at that. I got both our pronouns correct.
Wild was also accused of ignoring concerns regarding harassment and abuse within her own Discord server.
Oh, news to me.
Abusive behavior towards collaborators. Collaborators on Wild's podcast and Discord server have corroborated Gender's accusations, alleging a pattern of abusive behavior and harassment.
And would you be shocked to know that's from nowhere? Again, this isn't an issue of it not being able to tell a good source from a bad source. This is just made up. I did kind of wonder how it could possibly come to these conclusions. I've got two soft theories. I'm not going to say these are the only two options, but these are the only things I could personally think of. The first is, while there are not transcripts that are put out on the podcast, if this thing is able to basically scrape the audio data and analyze it from the podcast feed, well, Jesse and I do give each other crap because yes, this thing doesn't mention it and treats like the podcast like it's a separate thing that I got mad at Jesse on. No, Jesse's the co-host on the podcast. So we are frequently talking and frequently giving each other crap and saying words that will include phrases like, I hate you, but it's said lovingly and affectionately because we're ribbing each other. Now, is it a matter of the AI not being able to tell that we're being sarcastic or playful? Possibly. I don't know if these things actually scrape audio data in that way. I haven't heard as much about that, but that's one possibility. The other one, less likely I think, but I'll throw it out there, is that collaborations between YouTubers frequently break down over somebody's toxic behavior, and maybe it just assumed that was such a reliable template for these kinds of projects where two YouTubers try and collaborate that it just plugged us into this template of drama and assigned us the role of harasser and victim arbitrarily. I don't know. It's a thought.
Oh, hey there. Vera from the edit. Yeah, I suppose it is a thought that either of those things could happen. In hindsight, though, I think it's a little bit too generous to assume there was actually a traceable cause at all. There doesn't have to be for this kind of nonsense. Anyway, just wanted to add that.
If you have other theories as to how it came to this conclusion, I would be curious to hear them. But yeah, none of that is remotely true. And it's easy to laugh about because of how wrong it is. Except, what if somebody other than me had seen that? What if that had started getting spread because people weren't checking the sources and realizing it was full of crap and started getting angry at me or at Jesse because of some supposed split, some supposed harassment that's been verified and corroborated somehow, even though it never happened? It's troubling because, yeah, I knew immediately it was false. Anyone who actually follows my work would immediately know it was false. But what about somebody who didn't? Now, of course, this is where evangelists, as I said, would jump in with the, but it'll get better. And they might even cite the next thing I'm going to point out as evidence of that. Because one of the funny things about AI is Because it's generating its response fresh each time, even when you ask it the same questions a second time, you may not get the same answer. At the very least, it's not going to be worded identically, even if it basically amounts to the same thing. So, out of curiosity, after I'd bitched about this on Blue Sky and the fact that it was all fake, I checked this stuff again. And that's when I got this result.
Several controversies and online rumors have surrounded the YouTube channel Council of Geeks and its host, Vera Wild, formerly Nathaniel Wayne. The host has openly discussed online attacks, including a highly publicized feud with fellow creator Jesse Gender, and criticism regarding her commentary on the Neil Gaiman allegations.
Now, yes, I am aware of some of the criticism, especially on Reddit, about how I covered, especially early on, those podcasts. There was a belief that my criticism of how badly those podcasts were presented in a way kind of helped Gaiman and lend credibility to the idea that the accusations weren't accurate. I understand where those criticisms come from. I don't agree with them, and especially if you followed my coverage since then, I obviously am not defending the freaking guy. But anyways, that's context for that, just in case you didn't know. But again, highly publicized feud with Jesse Gender. The highly publicized feud that you made up and that your own next entry in this thing is going to dispute.
Feud with Jesse Gender. In October 2025, an automated summary from a Google product claimed the Council of Geeks channel was over due to a toxic feud with collaborator Jesse Gender, a claim which Wild immediately debunked. The summary was a false representation of events, as the two were actively working together on a podcast at the time. Yeah, we were fucking out and working on a podcast. What the fuck do you want? Oh, Jesus Christ. This thing is it's just so funny. It's just so funny. This whole thing is just very funny to me. Wild called out the error, illustrating how misinformation can be generated and spread online.
Interesting that you were saying that immediately after a paragraph where you just casually throw out the highly publicized feud between me and Jesse. Does this thing not even check its own responses for contradictions with what it immediately said before? The answer is no. No, it doesn't. And I know some evangelists are going to say, okay, but it got corrected. Like as soon as possible, it got corrected. Yes, but as soon as possible was because I spotted it. And then when I looked into it again, it had scraped my debunking it off of Blue Sky. If I hadn't said anything, who knows what it might currently be saying? Oh, hi. There was a whole section that I meant to talk about that I kind of forgot, so we'll cover it here. When I talked about this on Blue Sky, I noticed a whole lot of people bringing up the idea that I could somehow sue for defamation. There's a litany of reasons why that is just not a good idea and probably wouldn't work. And just to head off that discussion in the comments, I'm going to go through them real quickly. Keep in mind, I am not a lawyer, and this is based off my lay understanding of the law, but here we go anyway. Number one, the nebulous nature of AI outputs already puts me on the back foot because I can't even get it to recreate the problem a second time, which means that it might very well be treated like a newspaper that runs something that's wrong and then issues a retraction. It got fixed later. Now, that having been said, a retraction is not a legal defense. A newspaper can still get sued if the offense was big enough, which brings me to the second issue. While I don't like to think of myself as a public figure, I obviously am enough of one for Google AI to have even been able to compile enough information to come up with the nonsense it came up with. And if I were to be treated as a public figure, that would mean that I wouldn't just have to prove that the information was wrong, I'd have to prove what's called actual malice. Now, to be clear, this is a legal term and has nothing to do with wicked intent, but just refers to the idea that someone acts with actual malice when they know for a certainty that something is false at the time that they say or print it. And that is the legal level that you have to meet in order to claim defamation against a public figure. This statute exists for a litany of reasons, but basically it boils down to allowing there to be room for people to speak truth to power with a little bit more leniency, whereas private citizens get to have a higher degree of scrutiny and a higher expectation that anything published about them will be correct. They shouldn't be part of the rumor mill, and therefore they don't have to meet the actual malice standard if a private citizen without a public footprint sues for defamation. So these two factors together, it's unclear what I'd even be able to take to court since basically all I have are screenshots, which could very easily be doctored. And even if I had more solid evidence, I'm probably going to have to meet a higher standard because effectively within this scenario, I am a public figure. And then there's the third and most important factor. I can't afford to sue Google. And given the first two factors that I already mentioned, I have a hard time believing anyone with the means to sue Google would take me on pro bono. I don't think it's a good case. All that having been said, I would not be shocked if this kind of nonsense does get Google and other AI search engines into trouble legally down the road. Kind of like how we are seeing generative image and video AI get really taken to task over copyright issues now. I think search-related AIs are going to start getting taken to task over stuff like this by people who actually have the means to go up against Google and who have a better case than I do. Okay, tangent over. Thank you for indulging me. Back to Vera in the studio. Now, since I mentioned Reddit, I also kind of want to point out this is not my first rodeo, because the first time I remember seeing a messed up AI summary of my stuff was, in fact, one of Reddit's AI summaries. Now, as I mentioned, my coverage of Neil Gaiman got a fair amount of discourse put around it on Reddit, but here was the thing that happened that was ridiculous. And I thought I'd screenshotted it and saved it. I can't find it now, so if I did, I might have accidentally deleted it, so apologies for that. So this is a little bit of a take my word on it, except I'm going to show you something else from Reddit to kind of illustrate what it is I'm talking about anyway. So this, again, not limited to Google. The entire concept of AI summaries are borked, but there was a time when I saw a Reddit AI summary in regards to me that claimed the controversy around me. Boy, it loves to make up controversies, doesn't it? Controversies are so juicy. There isn't one? Cool, let's make one up. The controversy was that my co-host on my podcast, Neil Gaiman, had gotten into trouble, and that had caused controversy by association. It claimed I had a podcast that Neil Gaiman was a co-host on. Again, I thought I'd screenshotted that. I didn't. I did go back on Reddit to see if I could recreate anything like that, and I couldn't recreate that, but I did get something even more bizarre. Firstly, it claimed I had ties to the YouTube channel Geeks and Gamers.
Council of Geeks has also been linked to the controversial YouTube channel Geeks and Gamers. Geeks and Gamers has been criticized for its toxic fandom and right-wing leanings, particularly in their coverage of Star Wars and other franchises.
If you are familiar with this channel at all, you know how absurd this is. That said, this is the closest to an understandable mix-up I've seen from this nonsense, because Geeks and Gamers does, or at least used to, have live streams that it called The High Council, so you can at least associate the word council and geeks together and end up at them. Of course, neither of these two things that it's citing as support actually mention me, but why should that matter? And then there's this one.
Council of Geeks has also faced criticism for its handling of diversity and inclusivity issues. Some viewers have noted that the channel can be perceived as insensitive or dismissive toward marginalized groups.
Now look, I'm not going to claim that I've gotten everything right about all kinds of marginalized groups all the time. I'm human and I've been doing this a long time. I promise you I've messed up. But again, I can absolutely tell you that none of the things that it's claiming is actually in either of the two posts that it's cited. One of them was talking about a short I made regarding Doctor Who, and then the other one is about a video I made interviewing other trans people. In no way, shape, or form did either one of these threads support the summary that Reddit gave. I got this under a Reddit AI summary for personal and professional issues.
The Growlers incident. Vera Wild shared her experience touring with the Growlers, where she felt uncomfortable due to a prank involving a stripper. Is this real? Does this have anything to do with reality? I've never heard you talk about this. I'm so curious about what the fuck this is.
I don't know what the Growlers is. Is that a band? Is that a bar? I don't know what that is. And clearly I don't know what it is, because the first thing it immediately cites is somebody with the last name DeWild, and Wild isn't even spelled the same way as me.
Arrow DeWild shares her experience on tour with the Growlers.
This thing can take the thinnest connections and just draw comparisons, and it will say it with the exact same confidence as some of the stuff that it got more or less right. And if it's not going to just make thin connections, it'll just flat out make stuff up, like inventing a feud between me and my podcast co-host with my friend who I have known for frickin' years, and we have been working together for a very long time. And again, even aside from the innate self-destructive nature of putting AI summaries into search engines, which I already talked about, even in setting that aside, these things are awful at what they do. I'm not going to lie. There were times that I'd at least glimpsed at an AI summary when doing a search for something. Now, I would always still go and try and find primary sources because if for no other reason, when I talk about something on here, I'm going to show you what that source is. I will put up a still image or a screenshot of the source so that you can see what the source is, what the headline is, and if you want to go check it, you can, just to see that I didn't completely screw things up. But even then, when I was checking the primary sources for myself for that stuff, I would glance at the AI summary and still assume it was kind of accurate. I know these things hallucinate. I know that. And yet somehow still, even I kind of assumed that it was at least vaguely accurately summarizing stuff. Boiled down, stripping out the nuance, missing the point maybe, but that it was still summarizing something that happened as opposed to stuff it made up, which just, it kind of shows the I don't want to say bias in favor, but just like the normalcy of this, that like, and maybe part of it's my age. I come from a generation where once upon a time, you just plugged the thing in and it worked. Boy, I really am hitting the back in my day age, aren't I? But regardless, I now have to keep it far more consciously in my head to not even glimpse at those AI summaries, because I can't even trust a simple one, and neither can you. It can make up whatever it feels like, whatever it wants. Well, I say wants, it has no wants. It's a line of code that doesn't even do what it's supposed to do well. I know some people get annoyed when I kind of personify it a little bit, but part of the reason I personify AI is because I hate it so much, it helps me focus that anger. It's harder to get angry at an abstract concept, so cut me a little slack on that. But yeah, I wanted to vent about this ridiculous thing that Google AI claimed and use it as an illustration of how freaking terrible this technology is in a specific application that I hadn't talked about before. Because I've talked about generative AI for video. I have talked about using it for things like subtitles. I've talked about the general issues with the way that it's built. I've talked about the ways in which it could be improved, but they won't. But there's a lot of specific applications where, yeah, that has no business being there. And yes, I know there will be some people who will even claim they're not tech evangelists who will still say, okay, but it's good for these specific use cases. I have yet to hear, even in the instances where I believe you, like in certain coding practices or whatnot, I am not saying I don't believe you. I am saying I do not believe that it is worth the damage that is happening for those small number of use cases that are actually justifiable, especially considering that while an actual intelligent application of this stuff would mean that people could use it to do tedious tasks so they can focus on more involved stuff, when it is currently being utilized to just flat out fire people and make people do double, triple workloads because, oh, you've got AI helping you now. So it's a destructive tool. It is societally and socially and humanitarianly and environmentally destructive. And I don't think any of that is worth a handful of applications where it actually might be vaguely defensible. I just don't. So I'm not going to stop pointing out the times in which it is not defensible and has no business being used, which I would say AI summaries and searches, absolutely, it should not be there. Okay, got that out of my system. Hope you had fun. God, this is so ridiculous. Whatever your thoughts are on any of this, drop something down the podcast in the podcast. God, this thing has fried my brain. Drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills, enables me to do this as my living. There are other things you can do to help as well. Check out the podcast that I do with Jesse, where we get along quite well. I have a fairly recently released piece of merch that I put out not too long ago that has not sold at all because I never really announced it. It's the logo for my secondary channel, Break Room of Geeks, which also hosts the Council of Geeks podcast if you like to listen to your podcast on YouTube with a limited visual component. Oh, and one other side note before we completely wrap up. The last video that I put out prior to this was a compilation video, and I knew that was going to get fewer initial views just because of the length, but it also kind of got buried because of a combination of issues with copyright claims that I had to get cleared up, and then YouTube acting like the thing had already come out 2 weeks before it was actually made public, and then not treating it like a new video and actually presenting it to people. I had already put out a short that you might have seen talking about this, but I'm just trying to do what I can to be sure that as many people who might want to see it as possible know the freaking thing exists. Regardless, whatever, all that helps. Don't worry too much about it though. What I really want you to remember is that you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved. You are the council, I'm just running the meetings, and until next time, this council is adjourned. Now to thank my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Jared Boyce, Subin Lutfulla, Auntie Kate 808, Mara G, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, Movie Turtle, Oliver B, The Baba Duchess, Sean Miller, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Melissa Pedersen, Mary Mello, Becky Sparks, Loki Eris, Tracy Scrabbit, Pau Baraba Joggle, and Sir Didymus is my favorite. I also want to give my thanks to all the supporters who didn't get named because you are all indeed very nifty people. You could be a nifty person too if you go support me on Patreon, and there's the clause. Ugh.